1, 2, 3, 4.
If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
You're having a princess in the pea time of life is what I call it.
I just said to Tim last night, I am the princess in the fucking pea. Because I made him... I didn't make him. I asked him if he and I could together shift our Tempur-Pedic mattress cover up. Because it had slipped down, I don't know, 2 inches from the edge of the top.
But I get you. That's annoying. I'm with you. I'm a princess with a pea too, man. I understand. No. It needs to be flush to the edge. I can't handle it.
It chooses you. 2 princesses and a fucking pea.
That's amazing. That is exactly right. I gotta stop saying that.
I am Claire Patton.
Oh, I'm Teresa Sparks.
This is, in case you haven't figured it out, it chooses you.
It chooses you. For all 23 people who've downloaded it. But it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I have resistance to possible success. That means that I'm not making it available the way I should. My own psychology is, I'm worried about not succeeding, and so I just make sure I don't, so I don't have to think about it. Fucking fascinating.
But thank you for downloading.
Yes, thank you to those 23 people. Hope you enjoyed what you listened to. Actually, Liz's episode on art has gotten the most, which I find really interesting.
That's wonderful.
Isn't that
people
wonderful?
Love the juice.
Maybe she told people to go and find it. Maybe that's a direct result of Liz being gregarious and having friends.
Maybe that's the direct result of community support for an awesome person.
Yes. Yeah.
Not us. Her.
No, her.
Just to be clear.
I was going to say, what do we have to do to get that ourselves? And then I think about who Liz is and how she is with everyone. And I'm like, oh, well, I can't be that. So
I certainly can't be bothered to be kind and generous all the time.
Yeah. Nope.
And compassionate.
Yeah. It's interesting how people, I just always feel like, man, these people, do I have them hosed or what? Like, why are you my friend? I've got you. My smoke screen is intact. Like, nobody sees the nonsense is behind this thing. Oh my God, have made some very ill-timed and poor decisions around money. Oh, spent a lot of money on not things I need, but I could not fucking help myself. I have a new eyeshadow palette coming. Oh my God. I could not help myself. I was like, I need sparkles. This is happening. I'm like, okay, so I'm having alcohol. I'm buying sparkly things. Like, clearly this is comfort related. Clearly it's like, I don't want to think or engage in this particular way. It's also the time of the semester when I tend to decompensate. Like, it's about 2/3 of the way through and I fucking had it. I'm just tired and ready to have a break, So yeah, it's been an interesting couple weeks. I'm just like, oh look, let's see how much of a slug I can be and still like nominally function in the world. Like, only Mike is the only one who sees the extent to which I'm just watching movies and fucking around all day. I'm getting my assignments done, Like, I'm from the outside, everything looks great, but inside, no.
No, my control freak has been super active. My inner angry control freak person inside of me, and I am I compensated by deciding I needed to take the day off yesterday in an effort to like let go of whatever, anything, one thing. And so I ended up, what did I do? I laid on the couch for 4 hours and binge watched like every one of the Unsolved Mysteries that's new on Netflix.
Yeah.
And which was fucking great. Everyone should watch it.
What does a healthy formulation of time off look like? Right? Like, if you're actually relaxing, is it just laying on the couch watching TV? Maybe sometimes. But I find that I've been doing that for about 10 days and it's not really helping me. It's just, I'm just anxious about the shit I'm not doing,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm in that control overactive and lazy avoidance spiral.
Oh, lazy avoidance spiral is a good one.
Yeah. So if you want the sort of physical theater interpretation of this, that basically there's a continuum of active and passive. So if you spend too much time too far down the active piece of that line, you will naturally have to compensate by coming back to passive and going really far down passive. So you're just toggling between these two extremes. When I suppose the ideal would be to find a balanced place where you are accomplishing things, but not in a frantic, manic way, right?
Yeah, I suppose that would be the ideal. I want to meet someone who lives in balance. What does that look like? How are those people?
It looks like Liz Acosta. I mean,
is that why she's so awesome?
I mean, it's part of the reason. I kept bringing it back to her.
Yeah. I mean, because she does work incredibly hard. She's thoroughly dependable in professional settings. And then but she takes a lot of time off and she goes and visits friends in New York and in Chicago. And that's interesting. Man, maybe we should be trying to be more like Liz.
Maybe we should have Liz back on to tell us how to live our lives.
Tell us how to live. But the thing is, she's so cool, she wouldn't. She'd be like, you guys are great just the way you are.
I know.
Not helpful.
And we'd be like, hey, we don't know anything, but we know that we fucked up somewhere. So fix us.
We don't know much, but we know we're not as cool as you. Please help. Yeah. Oh, man. This episode, we were going to debrief the conversation about white privilege that just dropped after 3 weeks or so of working on it. And I am happy to do that because we made, of course, so many mistakes in that conversation.
Yeah.
Just like left and right. And we've been, continuing our education independently and a little bit together, reading and finding various sources. Not in an effort to try and be professional or perfect about it, but just to continually uncover our own blind spots and our own nonsense.
Yeah, so we both re-listened to the episode. Some more responsible people in the group listened to the episode several times, Teresa. And we picked out themes that were perhaps significant, and we picked out places that we were uncomfortable, places that we thought we could better educate ourselves. So again, this is definitely a process. This is by no means a direct retraction of anything we said or...
I mean, unless we fucked up. There's some things I want to retract.
But it's also, yes, that's true. But it's also cool that we are just being public about where we are in that moment. Yeah, we just wanted to show that this is a process. So we wanted to show our process.
Yeah. I'm into it as I really like being a good bad example, like good in that we should be having these conversations and bad in that they're just fucking up all the time and just like, yep, fucked up again. Okay, keep going. What does that look like? Yeah, I don't really have a story today. I just have a couple things that I noticed in that episode that I wanted to sort of have another conversation about, and then I've been reading a couple things that I did bring and can name at some point if I directly reference them.
I wanted to revisit something that I said. I said that I was uncomfortable with black anger, and then it also sort of came out that I'm just uncomfortable with anger, period. So
sure,
that is part of it. But I've been digging into How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. So a lot of my information is from him. His book is New York Times bestseller. He's been doing the rounds on a lot of podcasts, and so check him out. He's got some wonderful thoughts on this, and he's I don't know what I'm trying to say.
You just like it. You like it. He's helping. Thank you. I want to say his name slowly because when you told me his name the first 3 times, you said it so fast I could not identify what was first name, what was last name. So
Ibram X. Kendi.
There we go. Thank you.
Ibram X. Kendi, Kendi.
Beauty.
And his book is How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Yeah.
So I just came across a little thing in his book, just almost an offhand comment that struck me in relation to our conversation last week, which is back to the idea of anger in general, meeting white anger and how to meet that and support that. And then also my internal insecurities about anger and black anger. He said that black anger is he said that black firmness is often mistaken for anger. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I also wanted to put that out there in regards to you and my comments about you being angry about all this is it may just be firmness that I'm seeing. And for some reason that I don't know, I mean, we could certainly try to dig into it, but I feel like it's a deep thing. For some reason, I'm really threatened by that.
Yeah. I don't have anything to say immediately to that. I have all kinds of like overblown, very heady philosophical ideas about that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I just want to say it's super cool, and I think we should leave it in, that even when reading that quote, you replace the word firmness with the word anger. Like, that's how important it is, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Like, that's some, it's completely fucking subliminal.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that. That's something I'm going to be looking into in my own personal life is what my deal with anger is, and have I called something anger when perhaps it's just firmness.
Yeah, that's interesting. I will say, as I was talking about the things I was experiencing in that institutional setting with you so many years ago, I definitely was angry. So at that time, like, you were reading, the anger you were reading was in fact happening. I felt it as well. In our conversation about it, I don't think so. In our recent conversation about it, I don't think I was angry. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, that's fascinating. There's the... it's not funny. Again, like the number of times we laugh when discussing this has been pointed out as problematic, and I understand that point of view, and I understand why it's problematic to have two people talking about white supremacy, racism, and murder and be laughing about it. I get it, but also, the laughing I'm doing is entirely at my own bullshit. I'm not laughing about anything that's happening outside. I'm laughing at how ridiculous I am. So
I looked at, because that got brought up. Let's just talk about it. Yeah. It got brought up, and I kept that at the forefront of my mind as I re-listened to the episode. And I will say that for the most part, I was comfortable with it, with the laughter. And that's simply because of what you just said, that the laughter did seem to center around us laughing at our own behavior. Yeah. And the ridiculousness of our own mindsets. And there were times when it was laughing out of discomfort as well. So I'm going to name that too. Oh, sure. But for the most part, I'm down with laughing at my own bullshit and laughing at your bullshit too. Yeah. Well, and maybe like laughter, like given everything that's happening, maybe there's like a more serious, like maybe the correct way of dealing with it should be to like be very serious and very focused and do that about it. But I'm not capable of that yet. And so I'm just going to go ahead with my own flawed stuff and be where I am and hope I get better by working. So yeah, the laughter is definitely going to stay. But I was saying that in relation, because I was laughing at this thing, which is like that discomfort with black anger. I don't know if I have it to the degree you do, but I will say, imagine that you're a person who has received all of these unearned benefits from your society. And then imagine someone is saying, hey, you didn't earn that. And you're like, huh? And then imagine that having acknowledged that you didn't earn it, you don't immediately say, well, how can I divest myself of this stuff if I didn't earn it? Like, my gosh. Right. This is crazy. Imagine you don't immediately go there. And people around are like, no, you really didn't earn it. And even if it's not anger coming from the people who are pointing that out, that discomfort, don't be mad. That's, again, retreating to the personal. Don't be mad at me. I didn't do it, but I did do it because I'm the recipient of all of those privileges. I get that. Totally. Shit, Yeah, that I wonder if that's what's going on with me, is that my interpretation of anger is me making it personal again. Here we go, right? Or it's correct. My thing is that anger's correct. That is an appropriate response to the situation. Shit. Yeah, and I want to be clear that, I'm just trying to be honest about my emotional reactions to things. I totally believe that anger is justified. Please, everybody know that. But my reaction is to be uncomfortable anyway, Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I intellectually and culturally understand, and then I still just have my flawed, silly reaction. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, this moment that we're having right now leads into another thing that I noticed, which is we love each other and we're friends, but the fact that we sort of took great pains to make sure that we were comfortable as possible the whole way through
is totally whiteness. Like, white people are not allowed to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You can't make another white person uncomfortable. Like, you got to take care of them. And so that was definitely present in the episode too. As I was listening to it, I was like, oh yeah, we definitely, and we can say it's because we're friends, but it's both. Like, it's
Right.
because we're friends and because you're not allowed to make whiteness uncomfortable. Yeah. It's one of those rules.
It's hard because I was looking at that as well. And a lot of it is just we normally try and support each other. Like, there's a lot of, yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, those sort of reactions. That's always there. And no matter what the conversation is, there may have been more than usual. I agree with you that we were trying to do that.
Yeah. I think at one point you were stirred up a little bit and I was like, no, I get it. I really deliberately inserted kindness and like, no, you're okay. I understand. I deliberately did that. I noticed that at a part of it. So yeah, speaking for myself.
Well, that made me think about something, which is, and this is just something that you had said that I wanted to dig more into, that I have my own thoughts about, but we had talked a little bit about shame, white shame.
I have done no follow-up on that. I have done no follow-up reading on that.
That's all right. No, I've just been
wallowing in mine.
Well, I think that it is normal to feel shame when confronting these things. And you had said something like, maybe it's just, because we were talking about it in the context of Brene Brown, describing shame as destructive, would you say emotion?
Yeah, she says she defines it in relation to guilt. She says shame is about who you are. Guilt is about something you've done.
Right.
And so I was, I think, talking about it in our first episode on this because I think shame is appropriate because that is who I am. Like, I have been, before I was born, I was enculturated into white supremacy and I came out white and I got all of that stuff. So like, I think shame is kind of appropriate, especially having, been born into this experience and then not looked at it and not dealt with it at all, in any sort of real concrete way. Very much.
I think for me, I think that shame isn't a particularly helpful emotion. And it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation. I think when you're talking to other people, I don't think shame will, if you're talking to someone who really hasn't looked at this stuff, I don't know if shame would be a motivating emotion.
Let me be clear. Shame is not a teaching tool.
Right.
Shame is never a teaching tool. It just, that doesn't work. Shame and guilt both absolutely do not work to communicate a message.
Right.
I'm just acknowledging my experience of those emotions.
Totally. And I think it's totally natural for that to come up. One thing Ibram X. Kendi said that I thought was really interesting is that he wants to take the charge out of the word racist. So for him, racist is a descriptor. And so what happens if you say that something's racist, like this policy is racist, people tend to then get really hot about it, obviously. Or if I called you a racist, that if you call someone, a white person, a racist, they freak out. But he admits he's a racist, and so he's trying to say, look, it's someone who engages in supporting racist policies and beliefs. That's a racist.
Yep. Let's all raise our hands.
Yeah. That's me.
Because if you're not actively fighting it, you're supporting it. That's the thing.
That's
like
right.
You can't, there's no passive, no neutral on a moving train. Who said that? Yeah.
That is the basic premise of his book is there are two options. You're either a racist or you're an anti-racist. Racist is a descriptor and you can be both things in 80 times a day, depending on what you're doing in that moment.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about this idea that this is a process. And another thing that Kendi says is that it's a lot of work to become an anti-racist and to engage in anti-racist behavior. And it's a lot for people to commit to. It's ongoing, lifelong work. It's daily and it's challenging work. And so people don't want to fucking do it.
Yeah.
And I get that. I totally get that. I mean, I think I said in that last episode, part of me just hopes that we just fix it in 2 weeks, right? And again, I was just trying to be honest, but I recognize that that's impossible.
Yeah.
We didn't get here overnight.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get out of this overnight.
I reread Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Case for Reparations, and I was like, this is all, my freak out about my personal debt is nothing compared to the cultural and societal debt I owe as a white person. So it's really like, okay, acknowledge that debt. That's a very scary thing because it's very intense. And how can I possibly pay that debt? Don't know, but I got to try, right? Got to figure out how to do it. So,
yep.
Yeah. This, like the discovery that I am so completely indebted is a big deal for me. And yeah, I don't enjoy it. The indebtedness piece is real. And indebted, and I don't own anything. Like I own my car outright, but it's a 98 Honda Civic. It's 2020. I drive a 98 Honda Civic. I don't own a house. I've rented my entire life. I don't have any of those things. And yet, even though that's true, I am still indebted. And I still owe the things that I do have and the opportunities and the life I have to whiteness and to a history of racism, oppression, and murder. So, yeah, it's big.
That's a lot, yeah.
I don't know if this is the right time, but there's something that you said that I sort of did some thinking about, and I wanted to maybe revisit and come back to it from a different angle. You said something like it's hard to see things that don't happen to you, or it's hard to understand things that don't happen to you. And I did a lot of thinking, and I've been watching a lot of movies, like I said, and I feel like I understand the things that happen to those people just having seen them in movies. Like I had, the level of empathetic response I have. And so I think maybe it is possible. It's just really hard. Mm-hmm. Like it's hard to see, it's hard to watch, whatever. But I think it is possible. Like we read stories and we empathize with people, even though I have never been a wizard who lived in under a staircase as a child. I'm like, So I don't know why I went Harry Potter with that. Daniel Radcliffe just floated into my vision, and I was like, sure, Harry Potter it is.
Yeah. Good. That's a good point, T.
Yeah, because I agreed with you at the time. I was like, oh yeah, it is hard. And then I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know where else to go with that except to acknowledge. And this has more juice, and maybe you noticed this too. We talked about hierarchy of oppression, and we can talk about that again in terms of the articles and chapters I think I sent you. But I completely erased LGBTQ concern. I erased it as a location of oppression entirely. Didn't mention it once in the podcast in all of these conversations. So just wanted to name that's a big fucking mistake, because the 3 systems of oppression that are most active in this country are patriarchy, racism / white supremacy, and heteronormativity. And so didn't even name the third one. And, huge error. Yeah. There's do you name all of them all of the time? But in a conversation as broad as the one we were having, and as rambling and discursive and whatever, the fact that I completely erased it and didn't mention it at all is telling somehow, I think. And probably telling of how much those issues don't impact me, frankly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's not like I jumped in and went, oh yeah, don't forget this. So I own my part in that as well.
Yeah. But I think it's useful, to see, I really think those 3 systems are the ones that we're grappling with, that are the most harmful, that confer the most benefits to me as a cishet white lady, right? And so looking at those 3 and always having the rotating filter, okay, so what's happening right now? Let's see it through a white supremacy lens. What's happening here that's reinforcing white supremacy? What am I doing that's reinforcing that? Okay, now flip it a little bit. The next filter. Okay, what's happening here that's reinforcing heteronormativity? How am I reinforcing heteronormativity in my okay, and then flip it again and okay, what's happening here that's supporting patriarchy, and how am I embodying patriarchy or whatever? I think that's probably, I'm trying to come up with tools for myself, little check-ins I can do. And I do better when I quote, think of them myself, which is not to say that I'm inventing any of this. I'm fully indebted to all the people I've read who've done a lot more thinking about it than I have. But when I come up with a tool like that I can like apply, that makes sense to me, having come from my own synthesis of the information, it's way more effective for me anyway. And so I'm really happy to have that one. I'm like, okay, just click the kaleidoscope, just twist the kaleidoscope to the next one. Okay, what's happening through this lens? That kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm committed to that for sure. Oh, another thing really quick, and this is, this is in conversation, but we didn't say this in the episode. We really didn't talk about what it was like to be an ally, but I think maybe one of us said the word at some point. And so I just wanted to say that ally is not a title you can give yourself. It's a title that must be conferred by someone you have been an ally to. It is a verb, and it's a credential that expires every 24 hours. Like you don't do one thing and you don't ever get to call yourself an ally, and you don't get to do one thing and be called an ally for more than a day. You got to keep acting.
That's fantastic. Yeah. This isn't as much a direct response to last week, but it's something that I came across in my research, and it's something I'm really uncomfortable with, so I want to bring it up. So the website showingupforracialjustice.org has a piece based on Dismantling Racism, a workbook for social change groups by Kenneth Jones and Tima Oken. I'm sorry if I said that name wrong. And
can you spell it?
Yeah, it's Tima, Tema, Oken, Okun.
Okay.
This is a piece called The Characteristics of White Supremacy Culture. And this really rocked my world. I had seen a version of it on Instagram, and I made a little pin in it, and then actually managed to follow up.
Hey, good job.
Well, yeah, we'll get that. So basically, the idea is that I've heard a bit about this because of some friends of mine, but there's a tendency toward white supremacy within organizations and social change groups. So a lot of people have been doing the work of looking at that and how that functions, and then what people can do to uproot that. But I thought this was really interesting just from a thought perspective. So basically, this is a list of, I'll just read the website to you. Below is a list of characteristics of white supremacy culture which show up in our organizations. So these are basically ideologies and thought patterns that are direct result of white supremacism. So I'll just list them quickly. Perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, individualism, progress is bigger, more, objectivity, right to comfort. So basically, these are ideologies that you can see function in organizations. And there were two in particular that I really related to as someone who was raised in white America and educated in a white supremacist system, and then functioned within jobs in white supremacist organizations. I really related to perfectionism and sense of urgency. The first two are ones that I really feel are active in my life. And I think the thing was that I read that and felt so threatened. So in my head, it was everyone's trying to get rid of perfectionism and sense of urgency, which really threatened my identity as someone who engages with a sense of urgency and certainly has a problem with perfectionism. Because somehow what I interpreted that as is a doing away of any kind of quality or standard. That's what my brain did.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge the little white supremacist in my brain who is like, do not take away perfectionism. Do not take away urgency. Like that, again, this control freak, right? So what really struck me is we're talking not just about a thought revolution in terms of how we look at people of color, but we're talking about a thought revolution, period.
Yeah.
Like, we need to alter the way we function in the world.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I mean, duh, but for some reason in looking at ideology and thought patterns, that became supremely clear to me. And I fucking freaked out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that kind of freak out. Yeah. That's really wonderful. Well, and you know, the perfectionism worship of the written word, me. Oh my God. Like,
right.
My entire thing in every job I've ever had is we need written policies about this. Like, that was my entire, like, my whole world. And I'm like, oh, I see. Okay. Let's look at that as in a slightly different, look at it, shift your perspective just a little and try and, you know, see it through this other lens. Yeah. Yeah. That's super interesting. I don't really, I mean, it also, like, I hear that you feel like it, for me, I have worked really hard to be those things. Like, I actively try and cultivate that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh shit, okay. I'm actively trying to cultivate something that I thought was really useful, and maybe in certain contexts, but it turns out it's, you know, mostly useful for just replicating white supremacy and reinforcing it. I'm like, ah, shit, okay.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Well, I totally agree. That's something I've striven for standards.
Yep. We're leaving that in. Yep. I also striven for them.
I am word. So I've intensely cultivated this idea of standards and perfectionism and urgency. And this is the kind of shit you brag about in your cover letter when you're applying to jobs, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just it's just another fucking way for the white supremacist systems to infect our thoughts and our way of functioning in the world.
Yeah. Well, also there's something like, if you're focused on, if it's urgent, if like speed is important, think of all the things you quote just don't have time to notice. Like, think of all the things you can't notice because we have to hurry and get this done, and it's important that it be right and it be done soon and all of that. And you're basically just skimming across the top of a lake that is full of, white supremacist garbage. Like, you're just like water skiing on garbage, trying to get somewhere.
When you're reactive, you have no time to reflect.
Yeah. Well, and reflection, if you're at all self or historically aware, reflection's super painful. So there's like an internal motivator to go fast and never actually look at it. Because like when you start to, you're like, oh God, what the fuck? Okay. I have to change every single thing about how I am. And the sooner the better because people are dying. Holy shit. Like, yeah. Right. So yeah, there's definitely like that internal impetus to go fast.
Well, and you know, in my own life, I think it's no accident that the combination of perfectionism and sense of urgency, which I would classify as my inner control freak, is super active right now. After I notice that these are ideas that I should perhaps notice when they occur in my own life and notice when I'm engaging with them, suddenly, you know, I'm a fucking school marm with an axe to grind, you know?
Yeah. I told you, in the process, we worked with a consultant. Dr. Carla Sherrill agreed to consult a little bit with us on the last episode of the podcast. In the process of that, I had tried to get in touch and hadn't heard for 3 days, and I was freaking out. And I was like, do I remind? Do I like, what is appropriate for me to do here? And eventually I was like, yeah, you're just going to let it sit and you're going to be uncomfortable, but you're not reaching out. You don't need to put this discomfort anywhere than on you. Just hold it and see if you can hold it. And so that's what I did. And then of course the situation resolved and it was all fine. Everything is fine. It was all fine. But in that moment I was like, I could feel myself vibrating, like freaking out, like trying to meet a deadline that is fake. Like, it's completely fake. Nobody listens to this podcast. We don't have to put out an episode on Wednesdays. Thursday is fine. Like, yeah. So it was fascinating. I had a moment of that this week, and hopefully, and I think made the right choice, which is just chill. Just, it's okay. It's okay. Don't push. It's fine.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I have an acquaintance who has actually done a dissertation on white supremacy in organizations. And she told me this week that she struggles with that sense of urgency daily.
Mm-hmm.
Still, as someone who's aware, as someone who's looked at this, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also, with the urgency, there's like, and my earliest training in any of this was looking at capitalism and the evils of capitalism. And there's some good things about it, but for the most part, it kind of makes people lead horrible lives and, you know, be beholden to systems that don't really care about us. And, you know, all of those things are true. And I think about, like, if you're not, what have you produced today? That is your value as a human being. Have you made money for yourself or someone else? Can you point to something you have created? Like, and that's it. And I'm like, so bewitched by that idea that I forget that it's just an idea and that there are other ways to look at what being a human is and maybe try them out that, you know, that are not so dependent on making money for somebody who already has a lot of it, you know, or even like working in nonprofits, which I've done a lot. There's still that, like, I have to get this done. I have to do this, meet my responsibilities. And it's just so, like, I left. It's why I left to go back to school, because I was miserable. I don't know where I'm going with that, except to say that I have identified that working in a capitalist system makes me miserable. Like trying to find some other way of doing it, you know? Yeah. I always feel like I kill it. Like I say something and then it's just silence after. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not trying to kill the conversation.
I'm just thinking, I think it's because you're really good at summarizing, at kind of coming to the point, and then I'm thinking about what you just said and wondering if I have a response. It just takes me a minute.
This is a blessing and a curse, like the open-ended thing, much more interesting to listen to in a podcast than a bunch of like tiny pronouncements. Yeah. So like definitely tired but moving forward. And there's something else in this white fragility. I have a list here as well.
Do you want to say the name of the book?
Yeah, so this is called White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. It's by Robin DiAngelo. And it was published later than 2017 is all I know, because she talks about Rihanna's Fenty Beauty line, and that was released in 2017, so I know that had happened before the book was released. She makes a list of colorblind statements that insist that people don't see race, which I think I said, and I was like, oh, is it a neurological problem? Like what? What's your, you know... but then also she coins a second term that's color celebrating. I work in a very diverse environment. I have people of color in my family. I have married a person of color. I have biracial children. I was in the military. I used to live in New York. Like that sort of thing. As though it's a badge that we get. Like a Girl Scout badge, like pink, and that's all. And then, you know, we're done. Yeah. And she says the question isn't, is the claim true or false? Because we're not going to come to an agreement about that. Because either or dichotomy, like, it doesn't work when you're talking about something as complex and sensitive to people involved in it as racism. But she asks instead, how does this claim function in the conversation? And that is something that I find really, again, useful. Like, so what is the true or false? Like, you can argue facts, you can argue beliefs. But if you look at how it functions, if you look at the more verbal side of things in the conversation, and you ask yourself, does this claim serve to reinforce white supremacy? Does this claim serve to move the needle slightly toward equity or a lot toward equity? Like, how does it function? And like asking that is, I think she's saying, more useful than right or wrong, you know, binary good and bad thinking.
Yeah.
Because like, it's so, and this is, I don't have a direct quote for this because it's kind of my own understanding, so it's probably flawed. But thinking of all of these actions as, like it's an ongoing developing system, like, and a system is a collection of functions. And like, it's not a static thing. Like it moves and changes and develops over time, right? Jim Crow laws too explicitly reinforce white supremacy. So we move them, and now we're a little more subtle. Now it's redlining or housing discrimination or whatever in the middle of the century. And then it's, you know, just coded language maybe a little bit later, and it just grows and evolves like a virus. Like, you know, like, experiences new inputs. Certain sections of society recognize it and say, hey, no, don't do it that way. And we're like, okay, well, we're still going to do it, though. So now it's just going to look like this. And it
Yep.
just keeps growing and evolving. Yeah. So the question is, how do we say, just don't do it? Like, no, no more, right? And I think a lot of people are working on answers to that question and have proposed some. And we will find them as we continue to educate ourselves.
This is true.
Mm.
I had just one more thing, and you and I spoke about this a little bit privately beforehand, but we have done a couple of stories now.
This is an important one, yeah.
Centered around African-American experience. You did the MOVE bombings.
Yep.
And I did an episode where I talked about the story of Fannie Lou Hamer, activist. And we did a bit of thinking and talking about that, and we felt like...
And looking at other people who know more.
Yes, thank you. And we recognized that we were telling Black stories when we don't have the right to do that.
Yeah, those are not our stories to tell. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it goes with what I just said from the Robin DiAngelo, color celebrating.
Yeah.
Look at this amazing, or, you know, in the case of the MOVE bombing, look at how horrible. I can see a way, and maybe if I had approached the MOVE bombing from the perspective of white supremacist Philadelphia Police Department and organization, it's also a white story because it's essentially white people bombing Black people, right? I can see maybe that. Or if you would approach Fannie Lou Hamer from the perspective of the sheriffs who were beating her or, you know, doing all of that, there's a way that we could own that.
Yeah.
But I think both of us tried to take the other side of the story.
Right.
And, like, how much more interesting to hear people talk about these horrible white supremacist things. Like, because look, we don't want to look at that. It's hard, whatever. It's so much easier to celebrate. And I think we both sort of fell into that. I was going to say, what if everything we're doing is just trying to make ourselves feel better about it? Like, that's a very important question to ask and keep asking, I think. Because, like, what if every single thing I'm doing is really just about making me feel okay? Like, is there a way for that to also be actively anti-racist? You know, TBD. Let's keep working. Yeah. What were you going to say?
That's a big one. No, I'm totally on that. Yeah. I mean, there is something, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how each person's dialogue is, but mine is definitely like this. The right thing to do is to examine this and to look at this and talk about it. So I don't know if that's an attempt to make myself feel better. I'm sure that's part of it, right?
Yeah. It doesn't feel good is the thing. It's like it makes me feel better, but also it doesn't feel good. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much here, man. There's so much here. There's a lot of learning I still need to do. Right. So the one other thing is that you and I both used, and this is connected to all the white lady feels, okay? You and I both use language around feeling, quote, pinned down. Mm-hmm. And this was pointed out, it was pointed out to me that was, something the listener noticed. And so first of all, that's very non-consensual sexual language. Like, that's the language of rape, a little bit. At least for my part, that's sort of how I, like literally, like, some weight holding me, being completely in control of my body against a surface that I can't get away from, is how I described an emotional feeling about talking about these things.
Okay.
Talking about white supremacy and my role in white supremacy. And I've done a little bit of thinking about it, and it's so interesting because I don't think I ever actually have been, in an objective sense, confronted about my racism. But I felt confronted. And so what, like how intense the white tantrum is when it's even mentioned that, you know, maybe this is something that's happening. I immediately go to, I felt pinned down, I was pinned down, and they were right. And no, they did not. Because you can't. It's dangerous to do that to white people. We react poorly, and the police work for us. Mm-hmm. So, can't do that. That's not an effective tactic. Shame and guilt are not. The pinning down, that sort of thing. So I'm trying to think of a different way of saying that. And I haven't come up with it yet. Go ahead.
Is confronted the right word?
Confronted is more accurate. Confronted is definitely more accurate. So let's go with, I like that. Let's go with that for now. So And like my emotional response to that moment was completely disproportionate to what was happening, and was entirely about something I don't understand yet about whiteness and how I operate. So just wanted to name that for sure. And that feels really important.
Thank you for saying that. It's a really interesting point. And I feel like using the word pin down in this way feels related to me saying that firmness is anger.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like the same thing.
Yeah,
to me.
I can see that. Yeah, definitely related. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting and confronted much better. And even as I think about it, though, confronted, nope, not even really. Not even.
Right.
Like, confrontation implies some sort of more intensity on the part of the person speaking to me that wasn't present. So like the things I took emotionally are not the things that were actually happening.
Right.
And I'm going to definitely do some more reading about that, because it seems like if that happens, like that emotional overreaction to it, and I haven't done enough reading or thinking to really go anywhere with this, I don't think, but I feel like it's related to White Lady Tears. Like, my emotional overreaction serves in some way to reinforce white supremacy, but I haven't figured out exactly how that functions yet.
Yeah, I mean that's white fragility, right?
Yeah,
is us overreacting,
not having capacity, not having ability. Yeah, not having yet developed it. Yeah,
and it really hits home how sensitive we really are.
Yeah,
as white people. You know?
Yeah. Well,
and overreact
and on the one hand, like, how ridiculous for us to be sensitive about that. You got to be kidding me. That's the thing that you're freaking out about. And on the other hand, everything we have is dependent on this structure remaining in place, right? All of the power we have, all of the unearned power we have is dependent on this staying in place. So any hint of a questioning of it, that reaction. And like, maybe that's just when I have that kind of reaction, that's when I know my whiteness is reacting. And it's not Teresa, it's whiteness, like operating through me somehow, you know? So yeah, pretty interested in that. Yeah, so I mean, made a lot of mistakes in that conversation. I feel very lucky that I get to point out those mistakes and notice them. And I'm sure we've made mistakes in this one too. A larger issue that we sort of touched on, and that I think this is the moment in that first conversation where I completely erased LGBTQ issues. We were talking about the hierarchy of oppression, and have done a little bit of reading since then about that from Audre Lorde and Kimberly Crenshaw, and are working through material, doing some thinking about that, whether it's valid as a concept or not, and if it is, what hierarchy might be acceptable. Those are the two questions we're sort of reading about at the moment, I think. So don't have anything to say about that in particular, but I know that when we were talking about that, I was talking about economic oppression. And I just want to be clear in this episode, I did not come from an economically oppressed situation. I came from a poorer situation. But I did not, my family and my situation did not lack access to opportunities. We're not systematically excluded from opportunities. And so I just wanted to name that. Then I got real sloppy there. Because I grew up poor in West Virginia, I felt like I had a right to that label in some way. And I don't think I do. Because my parents, my mom was a nurse. My dad worked for the city. We didn't have a lot of money, but that is not oppression. That's just being poor. So wanted to name that for sure.
Yeah, I identify with that as well.
Yeah, like this feeling of like needing to claim a place of oppression, like managing that feeling in myself where I have to name the place where I'm oppressed too, because because what would I have to do? What do I have to change if I didn't have a location of oppression? And so thinking about that and the feelings that statement or that idea raises in me, I imagine what it's like for white men in this culture. Who literally have access to everything without question. They can do anything, right? they can get away with so much. Like, the law's written by them and it protects them and it's for them and on and on and on. So, like, really engaging with this and what would I have to do to change the way I operate so that I didn't take advantage of those things, or so that I acknowledged the various ways they were supporting me and then used the privilege I have in the service of equity, or, you know, like, what is that? What does that look like? So, it feels... I only have one actual location of oppression in that I'm a woman. I don't know how to finish the thought. Like, I just found it really, I was like, ooh, that's kind of gross that you were like really grasping for another place of oppression. Particularly one that you've kind of outgrown. Like, it's no longer relevant to you, which indicates that it's not actually a place of oppression. Yeah.
Right. I relate to that a lot.
I'm just surprised at the levels of my grossness. Sometimes like, Jesus, really? Like, come on, what are you doing? And like, in the moment, totally unaware. And then 10 minutes later, like, what the fuck did I just say? Oh my God. Yeah. It's like White Supremacy. Have you seen, did you ever watch QI, that,
Yeah.
You
because
know.
of you.
Yeah. QI is my jam. And there was one early season, an episode where they talked about this ant that basically, or a fungus that like lands on the ant and plants itself and basically drives the ant's body around. That fungus is white supremacy. White supremacy has is a fungus that has landed on me and grown in me and just drives my body around and operates my mouth. And like, I think it's me. And then I look back and I'm like, oh shit, it was the fungus talking. Like, yeah. And the end of the fungus story on QI is that the fungus then makes the ant climb up a tree and it eats the rest of the ant's body from the inside so that it can reproduce itself. And so like, the end of my journey as a person struggling with her own white supremacy is to like be a hollow shell of a being up a tree while white supremacy just replicates in my child or in people around me. Like, it's just fucking horrifying when you look at it that way. Oh God. Yeah, so, you know, It Chooses You has started our second season, and episodes are labeled like that now. And I think what has chosen us is the need to deal with our white supremacy and to really, like, understand it better than we do. And, yeah, so I don't know what it'll look like moving forward in the podcast, but... I think it definitely is, for me anyway, the frame through which I'm looking at almost everything that happens to me these days. So
our email is itchoosesyou.podcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
So if you notice anything, if you want to comment, please come find us, email us. Thank you guys so much. Teresa, thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah. Thanks, Claire. It was great. Yeah. And we'll be back next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyouPodcast@gmail.com.